Hello, everybody. I'm Jayme CheeseSlice, the engineer and producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. And today we've got a good one for you. We're going to be talking about Lebanon and all the shenanigans that are happening in that part of the world right now. So if this is the first time you've ever watched Uncontrolled Opposition, maybe you've heard us on the radio, what you need to know, this is first and foremost a radio program, and we have to record it for that medium, but we decided to do it here live on YouTube. So when you watch us here on YouTube, you get to see the entire radio program with all of the unedited content. And sometimes we have conversations that don't actually make it onto the radio show. So that's why we do this. Let's go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jayme, our hosts of Uncontrolled Opposition. Hello, you two.
Hey, Jayme. Hey, Jayme. Your mic sounds great, Jayme.
Yeah, I got a new microphone, but I don't have it set up to be on the boom arm yet. So it's I'm not sure if it's working exactly the way I want.
Sound great.
All right. Let's go ahead and bring on our guest, and we're going to get rolling. I'm going to hand it over to Gloria right now. Let me get my timer.
Welcome, Ziad.
I want to make sure we got the timer running.
Can you hear us? Wait. He's pointing to his earphone. Can you hear us?
Just not if you can hear us.
I don't think he can.
Oh, he could hear us right before we went live.
I know he could, but let's say, Ziad, could you please speak? Let us know what your levels are. He can't hear us.
He muted himself. I can't unmute him. Let me try taking him down and bringing him back. Okay.
Ziad, can you hear us? No. Okay. You heard us before, so let's see what happened. Okay, I'm going to mute my mic and call him.
All right. I think he needs to leave and come back because that usually will fix it. All right. He can see us in the private chat. That's so weird. Every time. It's like this is the fourth time or third time in 4 weeks.
Well, just for our audience, he's coming to us from Beirut, and there are power outages, and he's having some difficulty connecting because of these power outages. That's what happens when you get guests from the countries that, the United States and Israel are bombing.
Yeah, you'll never see that problem on Fox News because they never talk to the people from those countries.
Yeah, they only talk to them, the elite in our country, and then claim that it is.
Country.
Okay, we have to get him back in. Let's see. Oh, his phone's ringing now. He's not picking up.
Which understandable. I mean, they're under stress. Well, the good news is if we have to record this later, we can.
We may have to.
The bad news is it's not good for the people watching on YouTube. There he is. All right, let's see. Try one more time. Ziad, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yay!
All right.
Fantastic.
Go ahead. Okay, Gloria is going to do a monologue, and then at the end of that, she's going to talk to you, and then we'll bring you back on the screen, and then we're off to the races, and we're going to talk for about 55 minutes. All right, let's get started because Jeremy's got to go pretty soon, or right after the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria, Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today, we are joined by Professor Ziad Abu-Rish to discuss media lies about Lebanon. He's coming to us from Beirut and has been having some power failures. So I just want to, give you a heads up there. Ziad is a fellow at the Beirut-based Policy Initiative and an associate professor of human rights at Bard College. He is the author of The State of Lebanon, Popular Politics and Institution Building in the Wake of Independence. It's published by Stanford University Press in 2026. It's very recent. In the shadows of French colonial rule, modern Lebanon emerged not as a robust sovereign nation, but as a fragile construct shaped by external powers and internal fractures. It was engineered specifically not to confront Zionist expansionism, which could be traced back to the 1920s. By the 1940s, under French control, the Lebanese Armed Forces, LAF, was formed as an internal security force to suppress anti-colonial resistance. It was never meant to be an instrument of national defense against the economic and resource thefts achieved through foreign investment capital or by brutal military attacks. The 1950s and 60s saw Lebanon's relative stability fractured under growing Israeli raids. By 1975, Lebanon descended into a foreign-financed and orchestrated brutal civil war that tore the country apart for 15 years, killing over 100,000 people. Israeli invasions in the 70s and 80s continued to expose the nation-state's weakness. The LAF, shaped by its origins and post-war settlements, strategically avoided confrontation with Israel. The LAF, shaped by its origins and post-war settlements, strategically avoided confrontation with Israel. The Lebanese armed forces were never politically authorized or equipped for national defense against an invading and occupying army. In the early 1980s, amid Israeli occupation, Hezbollah emerged not as the cause of Lebanon's woes, as Washington and Tel Aviv would like us to believe, but as a response to the vacuum created by having no external protection. Since the Lebanese government failed to expel occupiers or deter aggression, Hezbollah took on that defensive role. It liberated the South in 2000, withstood the devastating 2006 Israeli war, and became the de facto protector of border communities against persistent hostilities. Meanwhile, Lebanon's predator class, tethered to Washington's patronage, privately urged more bombings to weaken the resistance, as exposed in cables. While the LAF provided international optics and repressed domestic oppression, Hezbollah mounted real resistance. The 2005 Syrian withdrawal, the 2006 war, endless political crises, the 2019 economic collapse, and the 2020 Beirut port explosion further hollowed out the nation state. Foreign aid, especially U.S. military support to the LAF, billions since 2006, came with the usual strings attached. Focus all resources on repressing domestic opposition. Never use these forces or money against Israel. Today, in the wake of the 2023-24 war and fragile ceasefires, the pattern repeats. Israel continues strikes, incursions, and occupation of Lebanese territory. The LAF deploys its resources, but instead of challenging Israel, seizes Hezbollah weapons. Calls to disarm Hezbollah in the name of sovereignty rings hollow. Western propaganda ignores decades of Israeli aggression, U.S. interference, and the LAF's deliberate design as an internal force without a foreign defense mandate. Lebanon's history from 1940 to now is the story of sovereignty without defense, engineered by colonial legacies, sectarian elites, and external patrons, whose protection against imperial domination and exploitation falls to those willing to fight foreign aggressors. To abolish Hezbollah, the U.S. must first stop funding Israel and supplying it with weapons. And Israel must back off. Thank you. Ziad, please explain the nuances of your recent article titled Sovereignty Without Defense and provide us with updates on imperial Zionist war against the people of Lebanon.
Thank you so much, Gloria and Jayme, for having me. As your viewers might be aware, Lebanon is currently subject to an Israeli war that in many ways has been ongoing since October 2023. And that war is one of a series of wars that I would say Israel has launched on Lebanon's territory, Lebanon's state, and most importantly, Lebanon's people, and in particular, the people of southern Lebanon. I wrote the article that you are referencing here and published it in the Beirut-based The Public Source, which is a long-form media platform that highlights really important issues in Lebanon and has an amazing team of reporters and investigative reporters specifically. To address the issue of the debate about disarming Hezbollah, for those of us that are living in the United States, we hear about what is happening in Lebanon in reference to the existence of Hezbollah, the fact that it is an armed group, the fact that the United States government has designated it a terrorist organization, and that if only we can disarm that group, then all problems in Lebanon would be resolved. And what I try to do in this article, and it's not an original argument, because many people in Lebanon have made it long before me and are continuing to make it, is that the main cause of conflict with regards to Israel is Israel's aggressive, militaristic, expansionist policies with regards to Lebanon. And so we need to take that as first and foremost, as the important context. And that if we want to talk about, unless we talk about establishing an alternative basis for defending the Lebanese people and Lebanese territory from Israeli aggression, any talk of disarming Hezbollah is a non-starter.
And what would you say are the Israeli motives, for these repeated aggressive attacks? I mean, obviously they want to destroy Hezbollah. What are their larger vision that they want to achieve?
Well, if this was really only about Hezbollah, which was formed in the early 80s, then there would be no history of Israeli invasions and occupations and wars on Lebanon prior to the 1980s. But we know that from the earliest origins of the Zionist movement, meaning the political movement to establish a Jewish state in the Middle East and in historic Palestine in particular, that the territorial imagination of this Zionist project and the Israeli state actually saw its northern borders up to the Litani River, which today would count as Lebanese territory. So there is a long-term historical territorial ambitions in Lebanon that are part of what we could call the Greater Israel Project in many ways. Now, for some in Israel, this is about expanding the borders of Israel. For others, this is about being able to settle the lands of southern Lebanon. And for some, there are certain military arguments that are made about occupying southern Lebanon. So I think it really depends on which angle you want to look at and discuss. But I think the most important thing is to realize that Hezbollah's formation in the early 80s was a response to, not the cause of, the Israeli invasion and occupation that happened. And Israel's withdrawal in 2000 from the majority of Lebanese territories it occupied was a result of Hezbollah's military operations against the Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon. So whether we're talking about Israel in Palestine, whether we're talking about Israel in Syria, whether we're talking about Israel in Lebanon, I think we really need to put a question mark around the idea that these are counterterrorism operations, or that these are operations that are designed to secure the Israeli population, when the main source of instability and insecurity comes down to the Israeli policies of expansionist, militaristic, and exclusive control of land and territory.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And well, two kind of related questions, and then maybe Gloria will have a question. The first would be related to efforts of Israel and the U.S., to support the Maronite Christian elements in Lebanon. Can you say something more about that historically and how that's playing out now, and how, from my understanding, there was supposed to be a power sharing between the Christian and Muslim groups, and how is that playing out today? And my second question would relate more to U.S. Policy, but go ahead with that question.
Just before you jump into that detail, could you just outline the different groups and then answer Jeremy's question?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think the important thing to recognize is that the population of present-day Lebanon, if we were to look at the Lebanese, are a diverse population. We can think about that diversity of the Lebanese population, obviously in terms of class. We can think of it in terms of region. So we can think of northern Lebanon, southern Lebanon, Beirut, Mount Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley. These are the main geographic kind of subregions of Lebanon that have, important variations to take into account. But we can also think about the fact that the population in Lebanon is multi-sectarian, right? So not only is the population divided into Muslims and Christians, but that there are multiple Muslim sects, such as Sunni and Shi'i, and depending on who you talk to, the Druze. And there are multiple Christian sects. So we can think of the Maronites, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Greek Orthodox, and many other sects that we could enumerate here. And so to Jeremy's question, very early on when the State of Lebanon was created as a function of French colonial rule, there was a desire to empower the Maronite community, which was used as the justification for why the French came into Lebanon, and to empower them in a particular way to both make them dependent on external patronage, French patronage in particular, and then eventually US patronage, and to play the typical colonial divide and conquer tactics between the population, right? And I think that's very important. Now, when the Zionist movement began in the late 19th century, and particularly during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, it saw in Lebanon the potential to create a Christian state that would mirror the Jewish state that they were creating, that would together serve as a kind of alliance or buffer within the Middle East, and disrupt, if you will, the kind of Arab nationalist or other nationalist secular movements that existed in the Middle East. So I think that's really important to recognize. Today, I want to say that there is a power sharing agreement in Lebanon. Lebanon is a political system that is characterized by what we call by political sectarianism. So, for example, parliamentary seats are divided and allotted according to sectarian quotas, right? So 50% of parliamentary seats go to Muslims, 50% of parliamentary seats go to Christians, and then within those blocks, you have more specific allotments per sect. Now, everyone can vote for the seat that represents their region, or the number of seats that represent their regions, but there's a quota system, much in the way that there might be a quota system to say, a certain number of seats need to be held for women or minorities, right? Except in this case, this is a function of a kind of sectarian system. Also, the three highest political offices in Lebanon are divided according to sectarian allotment. So the president has to be a Maronite, the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker of parliament has to be a Shi'i. So this is what we mean when we talk about the sectarian system in Lebanon. And I think what's really important to realize is that this sectarian system has been modified since it was first created in 1920, resulting in what we could call the post-Civil War settlement, in which the parliamentary ratio was adjusted from a 6-to-5 ratio of Christians to Muslims to a 50-50 split between Christians and Muslims. So I would definitely say there is a power sharing agreement in Lebanon if we want to think about it in terms of sectarian scenarios. And within that power sharing agreement, the United States and Israel have always sought to primarily make alliances with the Christian majority or Christian dominated political parties, and in particular, the Maronite majority or Maronite dominated political parties, because of a kind of long-standing political orientation of that political leadership. Now, I should make very clear that while I'm describing the system to you and the US strategy and the Israeli strategy, right, the reality on the ground is much more complicated. There are people who don't abide by these sectarian divisions and who want to vote or form political movements or political coalitions that, you know, bridge across these sectarian divides or ignore them. There are Christians who support, for example, Hezbollah and its military resistance against Israeli occupation. And there are Muslims who are critical of Hezbollah and who don't support its military operations against Israel. So I also want to, you know, not fall into the trap.
Would it be fair to say that maybe these divisions fall along class lines?
They might have historically. So you could have talked about how the overwhelming majority of the Shia population was impoverished, as opposed to you know, the class divisions within the Maronite population. But I think since the 1920s, these have in some ways leveled out. And so you have major class differences within each sectarian community. The real issue, I think, is that the populations, that while we have a sectarian system that tries to balance between Muslims and Christians, we do not have equal demographics of these sectarian communities. By all accounts, the Shia population represents the largest community in Lebanon. But you would not know that from the allotment of parliamentary seats. By all accounts, Sunni and Shia Muslims constitute a majority of the population in Lebanon, well over 50%. You would not know that from the power sharing agreement of dividing. So I think it's really important to understand that these sectarian political systems are put in place not to reflect a kind of reality, but to produce a particular politics, one that people are trying to work within, and in some cases and sometimes trying to challenge.
And what would you say, you know, as far as the U.S. designs in Lebanon, what would you, you know, say accounts for the extensive U.S. Intervention over the years in the country, and how would you describe, you know, what can you say about that level of U.S., you know, interference, whether, you know, trying to interfere in the political system, supporting Israel with all those arms, and what the motive of the U.S. you think is?
Well, I think, you know, the U.S. motivations in Lebanon are like the U.S. motivations elsewhere across the Middle East. Very early on in the 1940s and 1950s, U.S. interest in Lebanon had to do with the place of Lebanon, both regionally and independently, on questions of, for example, oil. There are two major oil pipelines that had traveled through Lebanon, the IPC coming from Iraq, and eventually TAP line coming from Saudi Arabia. Lebanon was very central to US corporate penetration of the aviation industry in the Middle East. And so Pan America, for example, had a major interest in Lebanon, both in the airport and in the airlines that were developing here. You had major trade interests either for the Lebanon as consumers of U.S. goods, or the place of Lebanon in regional trade, because of the role of the port of Beirut in being an important entrepot point for U.S. commercial goods entering. This is separate from the fact that the United States was also interested in using Lebanon for intelligence, communication, and military purposes. The U.S. embassy in Beirut was one of the most significant embassies in terms of U.S. Intelligence gathering. You might know that in 1958, the U.S. introduced 14,000 Marines into Lebanon as part of the then rebellion/civil war, depending on how you want to describe it. The U.S. Navy made use of the naval port in Beirut. U.S. personnel would come train in Arabic language schools in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon. So the interest, and that's a familiar story to all of us here, right? Whether it's elsewhere in the Middle East or elsewhere in the world. So I think it's just important to recognize that Lebanon is a part of the Middle East, and because it's a part of the Middle East and a neighboring country in historic Palestine and Israel, we are going to see it in the news more often, but it definitely is a part and parcel of the bigger picture that most people are familiar with.
Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like living in Beirut at this point? What's going on?
Well, I think, before we talk about the war, the Israeli war on Lebanon, or the U.S.-Israeli war on Lebanon, we need to also recognize that Lebanon is a country that has been subjected to, and the people of Lebanon have been experiencing a series of successive and overlapping crises, right? So we could think about the financial collapse of the financial and economic system. The Lebanese currency, the lira, has lost over 90% of its value since 2019. People's lira-denominated savings in Lebanese banking system totally evaporated in terms of their value, to say nothing of the fact that their dollar-denominated savings were siphoned off and blocked off by the banking system during the banking crash that happened. That is coming on top of an infrastructural crisis. You had warned the viewers about the potential for power outages that might disrupt our interview. We could talk about the inadequacy of electricity, the inadequacy of water, the inadequacy of major public utilities in Lebanon that have made daily life a real grind for many people. We could also talk about the kind of collapsing healthcare sector, especially in the aftermath of the COVID crisis, but in particular under the pressure of Israeli intentional targeting of healthcare workers and facilities since the war began. Now, in Lebanon, or I should say in Beirut today, when I'm speaking to you, the kind of Israeli bombing of various parts of Beirut has stopped as part of the second so-called ceasefire. But one step outside in many parts of Beirut, and you can hear the hum, and it is a constant hum, of Israeli drones circling the skies of Beirut and the rest of Lebanon. And if you look up, more likely than not, you can actually see those drones circulating. If you're in southern Lebanon, then you are being subjected to continued Israeli strikes by air, land, and sea. You are being subjected to displacement orders. The Israelis like to call them evacuation orders, but they are really displacement orders. And over 1.2 million Lebanese have been displaced, primarily from the south, but also from the southern suburbs of Beirut. We can talk about the demolitions, either through civilian contractors being brought in from Israel, or the actual placing of dynamite and the destruction. Over 250,000 housing units have been destroyed since October 2023, either through strikes or demolitions. So also, when we talk about what life is like in Lebanon, we have to ask ourselves where we're talking about. And while life in Beirut is much better than it was previously, and much better than the South right now, It is a dire situation, and people are living with the constant fear and anticipation of resumed Israeli strikes. The only reason they've stopped right now is because we understand that the United States and Iran are in the midst of a negotiation, and there was an Iranian insistence that there be some decrease and cessation to what was happening in Lebanon. And so we do not have a ceasefire right now. What we have is a containing of, well, a pause in strikes against Beirut, but not a pause in drones, not a pause in threats of strikes. And if you're in southern Lebanon, up to the Litani River, there is no pause for that population. There is no pause for those homes and villages. There's no pause for those cemeteries that are being destroyed. And there's no pause for Hezbollah, who made clear that in this second so-called ceasefire, they will not do what they did in the first ceasefire, which lasted from November 2024 until March 2026, when Israel violated the ceasefire over 15,000 times and Hezbollah did not respond even once. Now they have made clear they will respond, and they are responding, and that's why we're hearing reports of continuous battles in different parts of southern Lebanon.
I'd just like to add a point of information, and these are war crimes. When Israel bombs hospitals, when Israel bombs schools, when Israel bombs water treatment plants and distribution centers and electrical plants and whatever kind of sewage facilities, anything like this, these are war crimes. This is not just a military target. These are war crimes against civilians. Additionally, the crashing of the economy is done through illegal coercive measures that we call sanctions, but these are illegal. You just don't do these things, and the destruction of the lira and all of that. These are illegal things that are happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that, the sanctions the United States have placed on certain Lebanese entities and certain Lebanese people, and the fear of being sanctioned for, operating in certain ways that the United States does not want, have certainly contributed to the financial duress and crisis that exists in Lebanon. But I think we should also recognize that there is a homegrown banking elite in Lebanon that was really robbing people of their money in a kind of what has been described as a Ponzi scheme that I don't think we need to get into the details of which, and who have not been held accountable for that Ponzi scheme until today, even by this current government that is claiming to be a reformist government and one that wants to actually move Lebanon forward, and has instead kind of hitched this wagon to the United States. And the only thing that it seems to be trying to move forward on is the question of potentially disarming Hezbollah. But I do want to just note what you said, Gloria, about the war crimes. It has been amply documented by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, by the World Health Organization, that Israel's war in Lebanon has involved many of the similar tactics that we saw and are continuing to see during the Gaza genocide, right? The intentional targeting and destruction of journalists and media infrastructure, the intentional targeting and destruction of the healthcare sector, the intentional targeting and destruction of the environment, the intentional targeting and destruction of homes, right? Israel Katz, the defense minister of Israel, openly said the goal in southern Lebanon is to destroy all the homes and prevent any of the displaced population from returning, right? Finance Minister Smotrich said the new boundary or border of Israel needs to be, up to the Litani River, which would constitute an annexation of the Lebanese territory. The Israeli media and Israeli politicians and the Israeli military are quite open about what they are doing in Lebanon. And I think the only difference between South Lebanon and Gaza is that the population of South Lebanon had somewhere to go, whereas the population of Gaza had nowhere to go. And I think that's important. But even with that, we are talking about over 7,000 people have been killed by the Israeli war on Lebanon since October 2023. Close to 30,000 people have been injured. And like I said, over 250,000 housing units destroyed, over 1.2 million people displaced. These are war crimes, and this is the new, MO, if you will, total impunity and lack of accountability for Israeli war machine in Lebanon, which is combined with the unending supply of US weapons and US funds to restock. There is no way at all that Israel would have been able to sustain this level of military destruction without the constant support and rearmament from the United States. And so it's really important that our viewers understand that this is a US-Israeli war on Lebanon, like it was a US-Israeli genocide in Gaza and continues to be so.
And where the staggering figure of 250,000 housing units destroyed. So where are these people going? You say that they do have somewhere to go, but where? And that must be the city must be overfilled with people, and compounding urban problems that already existed from past wars and mismanagement.
That's absolutely true, Jeremy. I mean, it really depends on who you're talking about, but there are public schools that have been converted to shelters for displaced persons in Beirut and elsewhere in the country, which has made the policy of returning back to the academic year an uneven one, because that means some people are able to go back to school and other people are not, either because they're displaced or because their schools are being used for shelters, as they should be. There are people who are sleeping in their cars. There are tent neighborhoods that have been set up that are obviously causing a lot of friction with local communities. Israel's policy of striking areas in which displaced people have fled to has made it more difficult for other communities to be open to welcoming the displaced. And this is this is a kind of pressure and leveraging that Israel and the United States are putting on Lebanon with regards to these displaced persons. So Lebanon is a population of 6 to 7 million. So when we say 1.2 million people are displaced, we're saying like 1 out of every 5 people are displaced in Lebanon. And you can see it in the streets in Beirut. You can see it along the Corniche, the main beachfront promenade. That's a public space that people can walk in. You can see it in very particular neighborhoods. There is a part of Beirut called Hamra that had a motel/hotel that has been closed for years, and that is a derelict building that I now see as if it's back in business, but it's not back in business. It's simply the owner, making money off the backs of the displaced people who have nowhere to go. There are apartment units of 3-bedroom units that are being rented out to 3 families, a room per family, not a room per person, right? And these are apartments with 1, maybe 2, but certainly not more bathrooms. So the situation of the displaced persons is quite significant. It is not something new to Lebanon because of, for example, over 1 million people were displaced during the war in 2006. But the difference is the much expanded strikes and the deteriorated economic, financial, and infrastructure situation in Lebanon, such that people are really unable to find an alternative while they're displaced.
How do people deal with this psychologically? And what are how are children relating to just having these drones constantly overhead, not knowing if they're going to be bombed, or the people in the South are being bombed and they're displaced? What is the psychological damage that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, I would defer to the professionals to speak to that issue, but we're talking about generational trauma. We're talking about children who have had their schools disrupted, who have lost their homes, who have lost their neighborhoods. who might have had a relationship to their family village, as most Lebanese do, who are now unable to return. The psychological, repercussions are huge, both for the children and the adults. I just want to, give a small example. Most people bury their loved ones in their villages, even if they live in Beirut or other major cities. There was someone whose relative passed away recently, who had to be buried alone in their village after receiving Israeli permission to move the body back to the village and bury it there. But no one was allowed to accompany the body and attend the funeral. So not only are you talking about the psychological impacts of the disruption of daily life, but the very rituals and practices that people use to come to terms with loss and death and injury and mourning are themselves upended, and continue to be so. Right. And again, unevenly so, because depending on where you live in Lebanon, depending what sect you are being differentially impacted by what is happening. Right. And this is why many people would say this is a war on Lebanon for pressure purposes, but this is a war that is targeting southern Lebanon and targeting the Shia population in particular.
And I mean, you could, as far as the Israeli, we hear some scattered reports, although it's hard to get good information. I mean, are the Israelis suffering some real losses in your estimation there?
Well, the Israeli military is quite tight-lipped about the kind of losses it incurs, not just in Lebanon, but elsewhere. There are also military censors that prevent the Israeli press from reporting on various issues. But even a cursory reading of the Israeli press and listening to statements by Israeli military and political elites, they understand that they are facing, a military resistance in southern Lebanon that they were not expecting to. They had assumed Hezbollah was finished as a military organization as a result of the 2023-24 element of the war. And if you know, there was the assassination of the general secretary Hassan Nasrallah. There was the assassination of most of the military and political leadership of Hezbollah. There was the so-called pager attack, which was an indiscriminate war crime that harmed mainly civilians. But we know, for example, that Hezbollah's adaptive use of drones right now are giving the Israeli military a lot of problems. Recent reports indicate that they have ceased any movement or operations during the day, limiting themselves to nighttime operations. Civilian contractors that were being paid to demolish homes in southern Lebanon and being paid per house or per building they demolished are more reticent to enter. We know that the casualties in terms of deaths and injuries of Israeli soldiers is increasing. We know that the Israeli military has withdrawn from at least one area that it was attempting to build a permanent military base in, right? So there's no doubt there's an overwhelming imbalance of power on the part of the Israeli military and the ability of them to lash out and dole out, if you will, death and destruction. But we also can see from what they themselves are reporting that they are really being demoralized and finding themselves in a difficult situation in southern Lebanon as a result of Hezbollah's military resistance.
What is the ethnic composition of Hezbollah?
Well, I mean, Hezbollah is a Lebanese organization, and it's primarily and so by Lebanese I would say Arab, but its primary social base and its primary membership is drawn from the Shia Muslim Lebanese community. There are non-Shia Lebanese that participate and are members of Hezbollah either politically or militarily. And we should understand that Hezbollah is not just a military organization. It has a parliamentary wing. It provides social services. It has media organizations that are purely civilian in function. So you also have not only non-Shia who participate, but also people who are non-Arab or Arab and something else. So, for example, Armenian or Kurdish origins or backgrounds. But the overwhelming, majority of leadership and membership are Shia Muslim Lebanese.
And just where is this funding coming from for Hezbollah if it's not coming directly from Lebanon?
Well, I mean, like any resistance organization, Hezbollah relies on the support of financial backers, either domestically or internationally. So domestically, it could be various business persons and wealthy persons that donate money or that have set up certain operations to help generate funding. Outside, it could be diasporic Lebanese that live outside and are generating funding for. And then, of course, there is no denying the role of the Iranian government in supplying weapons, training, and arms and financial resources. Of course, that has been significantly strained with the changing of the regime in Syria, but also the greater economic pressure and now U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. But these are the circumstances where they're able to do that.
Has there been any support from Russia and China that's been particularly impactful?
I am not aware of reports of any direct or indirect support from China or Russia to Hezbollah as a political organization. I think that conversation happens more at the kind of Russian, Iranian, or Chinese Iranian level. But Hezbollah is a very disciplined and institutionalized political, social, and military organization, and I think it tries to, especially after the intelligence penetration that was revealed in 2023-24, it tries to limit the channels through which arms and funding can reach it to obviously protect itself. So I think that relationship is, if there are states that are involved, it tends to only be Iran at this point, at least to the general knowledge of people who are following this.
Two questions I have. One, with the death of Nasrallah, can you say who's leading Hezbollah and how has his death affected the organization? And the second question would relate to the Syrian, so-called revolution, as you were saying, that has impacted Iran's ability to supply Hezbollah. How would you say that Syrian revolution has affected Lebanon? Maybe just saying more about that and the relation between the current Lebanese government and the al-Shara government in Syria.
Sure. I mean, the assassinated General Secretary of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, had been in the leadership position for decades prior to his assassination. And, I think he helped the organization reach a level of popularity, not just amongst the base of Hezbollah supporters, but the Lebanese population and the Middle East more generally, in a very unique way that historically is unrivaled. And we might list only a couple of other, military or political leaders in the Middle East that have been able to do that. And the very ability of Israel to reach Hassan Nasrallah and assassinate him, both in terms of the sheer military power that took and the intelligence it required, was a major blow to Hezbollah, beyond the loss of the personality of Hassan Nasrallah in terms of his strategic thinking, his political and personal relationship with Iran and other allies of Hezbollah around the region and in Lebanon. So it was a major blow to the organization, to the cause, and to the whole coalition. Hassan Nasrallah is now succeeded by Secretary General Naim Qassem, who is a longtime member of Hezbollah and was part of the top echelons of the leadership. However, many people have noted that he does not come close to the kind of charisma, strategic thinking, and personal relationships that Hassan Nasrallah had. But it's not clear to me that anyone could have replaced that loss immediately. However, again, and I'll go back to this, the conventional wisdom towards the end of 2024 was that Hezbollah was finished militarily and politically, not just because of the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah and almost the entire military leadership of the organization, not just because of the intelligence penetration and the invasion and occupation of territory in southern Lebanon, but for a variety of reasons. That judgment turned to be premature, and everyone is now having to walk back that judgment on Hezbollah. With regards to Syria, I will just simply say that the uprising turned civil war, turned proxy war, in some ways disrupted some of the transportation and communication systems that Hezbollah had to Iran via Syria and Iraq. The fall of the Assad regime and the coming to power of the current new regime, which is very much committed to not allowing Hezbollah to use Syrian territory to transport weaponry or funds, has posed various challenges to Hezbollah. But at the same time, we know that the number one weapon that Hezbollah has been able to use to wreak havoc on Israeli forces is a result of what are called FBP drones, which basically cost $500. The estimates range from $100 to $600 per drone to make. And so are therefore less reliant as they move into a guerrilla
they're
warfare
taking out
tactic.
they're taking out equipment that's worth millions and hundreds of thousands.
They're taking out Merkava tanks. They're taking out D9 Caterpillar bulldozers. They're taking out some of the missile defense systems. They're also killing Israeli soldiers through direct hits. Again, this is not to underestimate the violent capacity of the Israeli military, but this is to say that there have been clear strategic adjustments in the face of all of these challenges and losses that Hezbollah has faced to continue to be a thorn in the side of the Israelis' attempt to invade and occupy and shape politics in Lebanon.
There's two things that I've always wanted to ask about. Could you describe from your perspective what happened with these pagers and how this happened? And did you witness anything like that around you or know anyone that was nearby when one of these went off? It seemed one of the most cruel war crimes imaginable because it's so random and so devious, so extraordinarily devious.
I was not in Lebanon at the time. I can't speak to anything about the experience of the pager attack, but we clearly know that it was a long-term intelligence operation that was set up to either bait Hezbollah to purchase pagers that were prefixed with devices that could explode years before they were exploded, or that Israel was able to penetrate an existing order and reroute the supply in such a way to modify the pagers. As people know, on one day the pagers exploded. On another day, the kind of handheld radio sets exploded. These were people who were using this equipment, and some of them were not military personnel. All right, they were using it in their homes, in their offices, in their clinics, and the number of dead and injured that were civilians far outweighed the number of any potential, quote, legitimate military targets.
The other thing is this explosion at the piers. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, it seemed very suspicious that this was the reasons that were stated by the United States.
Well, I think there's been a lot of investigative reporting in Lebanon about what happened at the port explosion, And there is general consensus that there were huge quantities of ammonium nitrate, which is a highly explosive material that can be used to make fertilizers or to make bombs, and that that was in the port with the knowledge of all the various ministries, security services, and ministers that would need to know about something like this, and that there was a refusal to actually do anything meaningful to remove that quantity of ammonium nitrate. Now, what caused the explosion? Most people have accepted, and there doesn't seem to be a reason to doubt that it was, a pure coincidental accident of some welding that was happening nearby. Something sparked, some fire caught, and the ammonium nitrate exploded. Now, why was the ammonium nitrate kept there is a subject of greater debate, and judicial and other attempts to get to the bottom of it have been obstructed by various groups. And Hezbollah is accused of being one of the groups that was benefiting from that ammonium nitrate, and that was obstructing the ability to properly investigate it. And I think that should be said, right? But again, that is part of a set of compounded crises that have hit Lebanon. Although I do think the port of Beirut, because of the particular neighborhoods it affected and did actually kind of sway politics in a very particular way. And it is one of a number of issues that we don't have proper transparency or accountability about yet in Lebanon.
I think we're kind of coming up on time, but I have a question, and usually Jeremy asks this question. But in the educational institutions, how have they been affected by these narratives? In the United States, Jeremy could speak about how history professors in particular aren't allowed to teach history; they can only teach propaganda. And how is it working in a university? Jeremy, please take over on this one.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, what is, I mean, the horrors that you're describing, I mean, it would be hard to frame this as some kind of benevolent intervention by the U.S. or Israel. I mean, what are they saying to justify? I guess it's all just, the terrorism of Hezbollah. And what is your sense of well, you also work at Bard College, you teach there? So, I mean, what is your experience teaching with students and, in the academy, is their willingness to look critically in the way you're doing it? And have you faced any flack? I mean, a lot of professors have been attacked, new McCarthyism. So what do I mean, I know there are some exceptions, and there's some colleges where professors are able to teach what they want, and the students are often receptive. So, what is your experience about all that, or thoughts on it?
So, I mean, in Lebanon, I would say the institutions of higher education have primarily they've had their ability to teach disrupted because many of their students are displaced. It was unsafe to allow students to come to class or to hold classes. And that's a very separate issue from the fact that the Lebanese university was targeted by the Israeli military, and 2 professors were assassinated on the university grounds through an airstrike. But the politics of each campus depends on which campus you're talking about, who its demographics are, and what the political, diversity or lack of diversity of its faculty, students, and leadership is. In the United States, I mean, I think the example we've seen with the genocide in Gaza holds true with regards to the ability to speak openly about Lebanon. I have been fortunate enough to be in an institution that has protected academic freedom and freedom of speech, and so while there might be people that disagree with me and I disagree with them, that kind of repression and censorship is not something I have experienced personally. But there is no doubt that repression and censorship is on the rise across university campuses and college campuses in the United States, first and foremost as a function of college and university administrators. Second, as a result of outside groups putting pressure on college and university administrations and board of trustees. And third, in particular now, the federal government throwing its weight behind either directly targeting faculty, students, or staff at colleges and universities, especially if they're not US citizens, or putting pressure and threatening to withdraw various forms of fundings those institutions are dependent on should they not silence critics of Israeli and US policy. And the number of faculty, students, and staff that are being subject to disciplinary procedures, suspensions, expulsions, classes being canceled are horrific. And yes, it's very difficult to speak or teach about the Middle East in an open way in the United States. It always has been, but now the risks are even far greater, and the repercussions are very clear. They're palpable. I don't know anyone that doesn't know someone that has been directly silenced in one way or another.
Ziad, we're running out of time. Please tell our audience how they can purchase your book and follow your work.
Well, I mean, you could purchase my book directly from the publisher, Stanford University Press, and you can find it through other kind of wholesale book purchase sellers, although I always support independent booksellers, so I would encourage you to go to the publisher directly for any of the books you're interested in purchasing. You could find me on various social media platforms. I'm very easy to find, and and follow me there. Yeah.
And we'll put a link to the show. So I just want to mention the name of the book again. It's The State of Lebanon: Popular Politics and Institution Building in the Wake of Independence. And that's Stanford University Press, 2026.
Yeah.
Well, the opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network.
Oh, thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's fantastic. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbean. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. So we're still being recorded. Sometimes we record a little bit extra in case we need a little bit of fat.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a power shift. A lot of people sense that there's a power shift to the east, that the American empire is kind of crumbling, loss of legitimacy. So I think people are paying a lot of attention now to this China-Russia alliance and where it's going to lead. And I mean, unfortunately, as you were saying before, the U.S. policies have been so off-putting and so terrible that people are looking for new leadership and just something better. I mean, I think they'd like the U.S. to still play a role on the world stage, but not in the way it's doing it now, bombing schools, as you're saying, invading all these countries, kidnapping. I mean, outright piracy is what we're seeing open and blatantly. And people are just horrified by that. And so they're hoping, I think, a lot of people around the world, that Russia and China collectively can pave the way towards a multipolar world order that will be more humane. And so
it'd be nice to see.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, the U.S. still has the capacity to hurt a lot of people and to destroy a lot of communities and countries. And while I definitely think there is a shift, and it's kind of the beginning of the end, if you will, although some people would have marked it earlier, there's it is still the big bully on the world stage, and the one, especially for those of us in the United States who live here and pay our taxes and vote or have a right to vote. Whether we vote or not is a different story. that is what we have to
Yeah.
focus
Well,
our eyes
unfortunately,
on.
yeah. If you study history, yeah, you can see that pattern. I mean, U.S. or Western leader, they're intent on establishing their own supremacy and wealth, and I mean the crime that they're willing to perpetrate on other countries. You don't often see that concern. I mean, I think there are some leaders in U.S. history who were very compassionate people, like Henry Wallace was one, but these were always pushed out of power.
Or
The more ruthless
assassinated.
elements seem to always prevail at the top, and a lot of it, I think, is the big corporations who are out to kind of loot foreign countries and get as much wealth as possible, and they don't really care at all about the implications. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we
Right,
good on
Jeremy, I
time
know you
there?
got to get running, so if you got to go,
Are we good?
go
How are we
ahead
doing
and
there, Jayme? Do we have enough?
yeah,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
you
Because
guys
we had
wrapped
to
it up.
make
That
up
was
a little
good.
bit for the technical difficulties. Thank God it held. That's great. You had electricity. How often is it out?
So can I ask you? So do you guys edit the video and then you post it,
No,
or you're
yes,
just
this is going to be edited for the radio because I have to have it precisely at like 55 minutes. So I
okay?
cut it down
Okay.
and I'll get it. I don't.
Okay.
I try not to cut any content. So it's usually just all like the breaks and stuff like that, and like if there's technical issues, that's what gets cut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, please do send me a link to the audio edited version
Mhm.
when it's
Okay,
out
I
there,
can
and
do
I'll
that. It'll
share
come
it.
out next week.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
usually
No,
comes
no
out
worries.
on Tuesdays, so we
Mhm.
come out next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, the upcoming Tuesday, which is
Th th Thankfully or unfortunately, not much will change between now and then, and all will still be relevant. Un you know, that's
Well, I
that's
would love
that's
to
the
see an
sad part
end
of
to
it.
all the hostilities in that region of the world. It's just been going on my entire life, and
yeah.
I'm sick of it. And a lot of it's
Well,
sponsored by
that's why
my
as you point out, a lot of people have lost confidence in the media, and that's why they're turning to shows like this and alternative media, and where you can find what's really going on. And I mean, yeah, I think there is a pattern. Having studied U.S. history, unfortunately, candidates like Massey who speak out against wars were compassionate. The big money interests, military-industrial complex. Always finds a way to have them defeated. I mean, you can look at Frank Church, he took on the CIA with a church committee. And in that case, the CIA, there's evidence the CIA ran the campaign of his challenger in 1980, and they got him out of there. George McGovern, he was more of a pacifist. He got the nomination in 72 for the Democrats, and all the top Democrats and their donors left the party and backed Nixon. And many different congressional races. This has happened before, so it is an unfortunate pattern. Yeah, now you have the Israeli lobby combining with the military-industrial complex to do in people like Massey, who I think represent the desire of a huge number of Americans. And I know he was very popular in his district and in his state. And people, he's one of the few people who are respected in Congress. And it's sad that he's removed.
But
And Marjorie Taylor Greene is speaking up also, and they got rid of her. So that works in both parties. And then it's an intimidation. Those who are in Congress feel that if they become more courageous, then that's the end of their political career. So
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Massey
he
had a
was
good
popular,
comment.
but he wasn't popular with Fox News viewers, which was the predominant people who showed up to vote in the primary.
Massey had a good comment. He says, he's a little bit running a little bit late because he had some problems contacting his opponent and conceding and wishing him best of luck because he's in Israel. It's a joke.
Saw
Because he was
that.
in
That
Tel
was
Aviv, yeah.
amusing.
No,
Yeah.
no, that was
I
good.
couldn't find
That
him in
was
Tel
good.
Aviv.
And I think, by the way, speaking of the media, the mainstream media is trying to simply paint Massey's loss as a function of Trump's grip on the Republican Party, which I don't doubt, but it wants to overlook that AIPAC funding for his opponent was actually larger than all other funding his opponent received from other sources.
There's also some mystery as to something like 50,000 ballots that just showed up, and that was found to be unusual, but he didn't contest that. So
yeah. Listen, I unfortunately have to go to put my little one to bed, but
thank you so much
for having me, and apologies for the technical difficulties, and good luck. And I'm sure our press will cross in the future sometime.
Hope so. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
All right. And thanks to everybody watching at home. And thanks to Craig Foster Jardula, the executive producer of Uncontrolled Opposition. We'll be back with another episode next week.
And thanks to Jayme.
What's that?
And thanks to you.
Oh, thanks to me. Oh, well, I can't thank myself, but that's just tacky. Anyway, everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. And this is Uncontrolled Opposition. Mm-hmm. We're out of here. Bye-bye.
Well, yeah, and I did an article a few months ago. These documents that came out from